My name is Dr. Chris Jenkins, and I am the CEO of the Orianne Society and the host of the Snake Talk podcast, the podcast where you learn about nature's most feared, maligned, and persecuted animals. I invite you to listen to this conversation, and maybe you'll find that what you perceive as fear is actually rooted in a deep fascination. Welcome to the Snake Talk podcast. We have a fun one today. I have two biologists joining me, Ashlynn Canode, who's a graduate student at the University of Florida and doing her graduate research at Tall Timbers, which is up in the panhandle of Florida, and they also work on lands in southwest Georgia. And we also have Kim Sash, who is a biologist for Tall Timbers. And we're going to talk about basically long-term research. And we kind of have two generations, if you will. I know you ladies aren't truly two generations apart in age, but we have two cohorts or generations of biologists who have done similar studies and comparing those studies over time. So we're going to talk about some of that, which will be very interesting. But first, I wanted to mention that the way that I've connected with Ashlynn is that the Orianne Society has a small grants program for graduate students who are doing research in the Southeast. And I encourage all our listeners who are in that situation to check it out. We offer a number of grants every year. And it's a competitive process, and Ashlynn was one of those students who ended up receiving the grant. So we're very proud to have Ashlynn as a grant recipient and excited to learn more about what she's doing. So welcome to the podcast, Kim and Ashlynn. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for being kind about my age, too. Appreciate that. I'm older than Ashlynn's parents, so...
well, I could probably be both of your parents, so I don't know. Maybe we're about the same age, Kim.
So. Yeah, I think so.
But anyways, so well, I'd like to start off and learn about how people get into this somewhat eccentric field from the view of most people. How did you get into snakes? And I guess we'll start with you, Ashlynn. Have you always been into nature and snakes since you're a child, or is this something that hit you more recently as you've gotten into school?
Yeah, so I grew up in the middle of the woods in southeastern Ohio, and we had a creek right outside of our property, and so I spent a lot of time down there. And eastern red-spotted newts would always come up in our yard when it would rain, and I absolutely loved them. I loved being outside. I loved playing in the creek. I loved all the little critters. So I knew I wanted to go for something wildlife-related. I knew I didn't want to, be in an office all day, and I wanted to work outside and with animals. So I got my bachelor's at Ohio University, and I did their wildlife conservation and biology program. And I kind of went in being interested in everything. I didn't really have a specific, I didn't want to necessarily study snakes or study mammals or whatever. I didn't really know yet. But my junior year, I took a herpetology class, and it was very hands-on. We spent a lot of time in the field herping and looking for things. And I held a snake for the first time. And actually prior to this, I was kind of scared of snakes because I was under that notion that, your parents tell you oh, you get bit by a snake, you're going to lose an arm or you're going to die or whatever. But in the class, we learned that Ohio only had 3 venomous snakes, and they were all super easy to identify. And once I learned that I could identify those really easy, I just started grabbing all the things. I wasn't really scared of them anymore because I knew they weren't really, going to do anything. And then after that class, that next summer during my senior year, I worked in Maryland in the Chesapeake Bay on Poplar Island. And I worked with diamondback terrapins. And we also caught and pit tagged snakes because they are nest predators. And so that year on the field crew, I was like the snake person. Like I wanted to grab all the snakes and I wanted to like help with it. And I don't know, I loved it. It was my favorite job ever. I didn't want to leave. And then that kind of pushed me forward to be like, oh, this is what I want to do and what I want to work with for the rest of my life. So.
Well, how did you? We're kind of into your trajectory, so let's finish it before we go over to Kim. But like, how? So you're doing this job in the Chesapeake. First of all, which snakes were the nest predators? Did you have like rat snakes in that area, or what was eating the eggs?
We had eastern king snakes, black rat snakes, and actually, those were the two main ones. But I also found a rough green snake there, which was pretty cool because it was only the second one they'd ever found on the island in 25 years. They're pretty small, so I don't think they're nest predators, but it was another snake that was on the island.
Got you. So I'm assuming the rat snakes were the ones taking most of the eggs.
Yeah, those and the king snakes, they were. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So you're in the Chesapeake Bay. You're working this dream job. You're really finding out that you are the snake person, and but now you're at University of Florida. So how did that transition happen, going from undergrad to first job and then deciding to go to graduate school? How'd you end up there?
Yeah, after I graduated, I actually did another seasonal position in Elko, Nevada, doing small mammal trapping. So we were looking at kangaroo mice because I helped with a little bit of mammal stuff in undergrad because there were no herpetology positions available, and I knew I wanted to be involved in research no matter like what that was. So I did the mammal stuff, and then after I graduated, the job that I got offered was mammal stuff, and it was research, and I was out west, and I'd never been. So I took that job. Cool snakes out there also. And then for the winter that year, I kind of just like hung out, had a job. There was nothing really in the field during that time in the winter. And so I was just applying to, other seasonal jobs and grad positions. And I was on the Texas A&M job board and I found this one and I was like, wow, that sounds like the most ideal thing ever. And so I applied and I started last May.
Yeah, May 2024.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So you're at Tall Timbers now. Do you spend most of your time over in the Panhandle, or do you just go to the university on occasion, or are you really based in Gainesville area near the university and come out to Tall Timbers at times for field work?
Yeah, I'm based up here. My field season's March through October, so really the majority of the year, and we're trapping 3 weeks out of each month, 19 days straight. So it makes more sense for me to live up here since I work up here. And then the professors are really great working with me. I take, as many classes online as I can, but some professors, like if it's a Tuesday, Thursday class, they'll be like, all right, you can join online on Tuesday, but you need to come in person on Thursday. So sometimes I do have to drive down there at least once a week. Which is not as bad as 2 days a week, but it is a 2.5 hour drive there and 2.5 hour drive back. So it's fun.
Yeah, she listens to the Snake Talk podcast during that time.
Working on some brownie points here. Hey, that's great. So last question, then we'll move on to Kim. But so the project that you're working on, we don't need to go into depth in what it is yet, because we're going to talk about that in a lot of detail. But is that, I'm assuming I know the answer to this, but was that project kind of in place and you were coming to fill a particular role, or did you come there in a very, with kind of broad guardrails, if you will, and kind of designing your own work and decided to do this follow-up study?
Yeah, I came here specifically for the follow-up study. That's the role that I was filling. But, I did get to build a lot of the traps and set them all. So it still kind of felt like, it was like doing my thing. Honestly, it's kind of nice that it worked out that way because when I started, I'm a first-gen college student in general, so I didn't know much about grad school even. So going into grad school, I was really worried about what my question was going to be. When I was looking at positions, it was really broad and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get it down to my specific question. So it was kind of nice. This was kind of mostly laid out. And then, I'm doing the follow-up, but then there's also, we're branching out looking at cottonmouths and doing a bunch of other things with the data I'm getting, which is pretty cool. So
excellent. So Kim, we've known each other over the years.
Yeah.
And how did you originally get into snakes and reptiles and amphibians in general? I mean, again, do you have a similar story, kind of growing up out in the woods and catching snakes, or is this something that hit you later in life?
I mean,
Not that you're that old. I know.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I grew up in Wisconsin, so, snakes are pretty limited there in the time of year where you can find them as well. My dad was a large animal vet, so I spent a lot of time on the farm. And I mean, I'm true Wisconsin. I mean, I had Holstein cows. I showed cows. So I'm very Wisconsin. And I wanted to be a large animal vet, and my dad was always like, you should just be a doctor because, your patients can tell you what is wrong. But I don't really have much of an urge to help people. So I, kind of going into the wildlife field kind of seems more natural. And I grew up right outside of Madison, Wisconsin. So I went to Madison, Wisconsin, and they have an undergrad in wildlife ecology and the whole Aldo Leopold. And so I went to the shack and saw that, and it's very inspirational. And then did a bunch of field jobs like everybody else. Never had worked on snakes. I was much more of a birder at that point in time. I mean, I liked reptiles and amphibians, but I really just didn't have a ton of access to that. But I did take, a overall general vertebrate ecology class in undergrad, which included reptiles and amphibians. But then I kind of bounced around doing odd bird jobs all over the country. And then what happened to me is actually the exact same thing that happened to Ashlynn. There was somebody that was starting the snake project here at Tall Timbers, and they had Seth Stapleton. So he had done a couple of years of this project and was looking for an intern. And so I applied because I was kind of like, I just want to try something different, get my hands on some animals. Whereas birds, you just get to look at them. So anyway, I started as an intern for him, and then they wanted to continue the project. So they asked me if I wanted to turn it into a master's project. And then that led me to the University of Georgia, where I got my master's doing the snake project. And so that through, and then we see 20 years later, we decided to repeat this again. So Ashlynn is doing this the same type of trap in the same exact locations. I mean, everything about it is the same as what I did 20 years ago. And basically, I was just really wondering about the snake community and how things had changed. We had done some stuff on the landscape. So I was just really curious about that. And then with, pentastomes and all these other snake fungal disease, how is this impacting our snakes? So it just seemed like the time was really right to do that. And we actually started kind of before the pentastomes got kind of insane. So I'm really glad that we started it when we did, because we don't have pentastomes yet here to our knowledge.
Yeah. So you go to UGA and you do your graduate degree, working on this project, and then, but you actually are still involved with Tall Timbers. So what happened after graduate school that led you to this job?
I skipped a lot. I skipped a lot of time there. So I finished grad school, and then I really love land management. I love setting fire. I started driving a tractor on quail managed lands here in the Red Hills region. So I was I think at that time, and I think even now, I was the only female tractor driver in the Red Hills, because it's just not a very common thing. But I really wanted to understand land management, be the one doing it. So I drove a tractor for about 2 years, and did that whole process of, mowing lanes and post-burn mowing and setting the woods on fire and all of that sort of the stuff that goes with land management. And I did that for a while, and then I shifted gears.
Can I cut you off for 1 second and just say, I love driving tractors too. There's a zen to it. It's I have to go out and drive the tractor all day. It's I love it. Anyways, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I don't do it for 8 hours a day anymore, but sometimes I do miss it. And it's so rewarding because you can see what you did every day. And I love that, immediate, it's immediate gratification. There it is. I did that. But then I left Tall Timbers and moved to Port St. Joe and worked for FWC for almost 5 years on ARWEA. So that's the Apalachicola River WEA, which is 87,000 acres. And FWC is the lead area on that. So it encompassed both sides of the Apalachicola River. And I had 10 sites out there. And the funnest part of that job is they kind of let me do whatever I want. And so that's when I hooked up with Paul Moeller, and he taught me how to do alligator snapping turtle trapping. And so that was one of the highlights of that job. And also I got to fly in a helicopter a lot, which was super fun. So I did that for a while, and then I left there at FWC, and I came back to Tall Timbers in 2011, but I came back to the Land Conservancy. So I was a biologist in the Land Conservancy. So when people wanted to put their land under conservation easement, I went out to their property, to the private property. I did a biological assessment and did a land cover map, and wrote up a whole kind of like, they call it the baseline documentation report, but it's like everything that the land encompasses, the land cover, the species, everything in a document to say, like, here are the conservation values of this property and why they should get a tax benefit for making a donated conservation easement. And that's really super rewarding as well. You know, sometimes as biologists, we feel like we're counting the decline of things, and working in a land conservancy, you're always adding acreage. And we're at over 170,000 acres held under conservation easement now. So it was really fun. And so I did that for, I think, 11 years, and then transitioned out of that. During that time, I was still doing some species monitoring. I was doing gopher tortoise surveys on the easement property. So I did that throughout the Red Hills on about like 16 different properties. I had grants from Georgia DNR to do big amphibian dip netting surveys throughout that area. Just do kind of monitoring presence, absence of different species on places where we had easements. And then though that I just kind of transitioned naturally, because I'm kind of in a more of a, monitoring biologist. I have had grad students, but my lab is just, now I kind of have my own lab. So I have Ashlynn doing snake stuff. I have a student that's got GPS collars on coyotes. We've done a lot of feral hog work, looking at their diet, their movement, especially in a fire-dominated landscape, like how are feral hogs impacting stuff? Where do they move? Where do they hide? And just a number of other, striped newt project. We've got striped newts on one of our properties, so I work a lot on striped newts, but just a variety of things. But obviously, given that I did the snake work for my master's, it's a little near and dear to my heart.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like a great job. I mean, it's not driving a tractor all day, but it sounds pretty good. Well, so I want to talk about this, the snake surveys, kind of the, both time windows, and so we'll discuss that probably in chronological order. So we'll talk to you, Kim, first, but then and then also kind of after we talk about more of like, what you've been finding with whatever abundance or diversity, whatever your metrics are, and how those have been changing between surveys, or how you predict they might. Then Ashlynn, maybe you can talk to us later more about like snake fungal disease and some of the parasite issues. But so to start off though, Kim, so I guess kind of take us back to the beginning. I know you came into it and it had already been running, it sounds like, for a couple of years. But talk about kind of the genesis. Do you know like why this snake study started, and how it was generally designed spatially, and the techniques you're using, those kind of things. So kind of talk about the genesis, the beginning of it, if you will.
Yeah. So I guess I really started on the second year. So the 2022 or 2002 was kind of a pilot season. They didn't catch a lot of snakes. They were still kind of figuring out their methodology. And 2003 was the first year I was here, and that's when we were really catching a lot of snakes. So this was funded by a big USDA grant. So they were curious about predation and snake predators, not snake predators, quail predators. And so this included a big meso-mammal study as well as a snake study to look at basically what is the community ecology we have here of snakes at Tall Timbers. And so we set the traps up. So we had traps that are in bottomland hardwoods, traps that are in uplands, and then traps that are in fields that are just harrowed annually but allowed to grow up like in ragweed, just with annual weeds. And so we have those 3 habitat types where we have snake traps in. And our snake traps are like pretty typical. We have a 4-arm array, 50 yards, 50 meters long each one. And there's a funnel trap at each end. So it's a mesh hardware cloth funnel trap. And then we have a box trap right in the middle, of each array. And that has 4 openings where a snake can go in.
Yeah. And so for the listeners, when you say an array, those are basically like, picture like from the air, it'd almost be like a cross. And
yes.
it's like a fence, something that when a snake hits it, it's going to go one way or the other. And then you've got traps kind of at all the nodes
yes, exactly.
around that array.
Yeah. And so, snake trapping is super fun. You catch a lot of things. There's a lot of bycatch. So that is fun. But I ran that from then. I was here working on that from 2003 until 2005. 2005. Ashlynn, she looks at the data more than I do. But yeah. So and then wrapped up and graduated in 2007 with all that. But I also at that point we had a lot of different study sites. Ashlynn's just doing Tall Timbers, but we also had study sites at Pebble Hill Plantation, which is another tract of land just on the road, and at the Wade Tract, which is a pretty infamous old growth site outside of Thomasville, Georgia. But for Ashlynn's study, we just did one location for this time. And then I also was putting radio transmitters in gray rat snakes and corn snakes and doing radio telemetry on those 2 species, just looking to see how they use the landscape as well. So I would check snake traps in the morning and then track snakes in the afternoons, see where they were going.
And so what did you learn about snake communities and Tall Timbers with the trapping component? Any, maybe just kind of like what you were seeing richness, diversity-wise? Were there certain species that were maybe more abundant than others? Those types of things. Yeah,
so 50% of my captures were black racers. And this makes a lot of sense. They're a very common snake. They didn't really care. I mean, you'd catch them in uplands, fields, or drains. They didn't really seem to prefer any habitat type. They seem like a snake that just really wanders across the landscape wherever they want to. I think, and then my top 5 were, after black racer, it was gray rat snake, corn snake, coachwhip, and then garter snake. I think those are my top 5. But, everything really fell off after, black racers was like number 1, like just everywhere.
And so some of these areas you're serving, a lot of people wouldn't know, but I mean, some of these places are some of the better managed longleaf in existence. And so, I mean, if you, I just want you to speculate wildly. I mean, how much do you think that, those kind of community results you were finding, how much do you think that those maybe mirrored what like historic or prehistoric snake communities might have looked like in the area, or do you think they're actually quite different?
I mean, 20 years ago, I bet they were fairly similar. Now that Ashlynn's done her work, I wonder about, I don't want to steal some of her thunder about the things that she's been finding, but, I wonder about the human influence, like about some of these more venomous snakes, the venomous snakes, and just
that's where I was going with this. I wanted to ask you about the venomous. I mean, I know there's maybe a longer, more entrenched history there of killing, in particular, venomous snakes in a more systematic way in that part of the coastal plain. Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a break and tell you guys that snakes are one of the most persecuted groups of animals in the world, but we are dedicated to changing that. The Orianne Society works every day to ensure there's a future for these amazing animals. If you care about snakes, wildlife, or wild places, and you like what you've been hearing on the Snake Talk podcast, support us today by donating on our website at www.orianne.org.
We definitely need to have an in-depth, during this discussion, an in-depth conversation, especially about cottonmouths. Ashlynn right now is catching very similar numbers of diamondbacks to me. So I feel like diamondbacks are doing really well. We don't kill diamondbacks on tall timbers, of course. I mean, I know that they still get killed throughout this region, but I'm glad to know that we're still catching. I mean, we don't catch a lot of individuals, nor would you expect to, but I mean, we've caught pretty similar numbers. So that's making me happy.
And what I was kind of referencing, I've talked to a number of the plantation owners in that region, and I'm talking about like a deep history of like systematically killing venomous snakes and what that might have done. We're talking 100 years ago kind of thing.
Well, and I mean that still happens today. So
So
I don't know how much that's changed. I mean, as far as diamondbacks go, but I mean, the cottonmouths are a whole nother story here on tall timbers. It's just been bizarre.
And we'll get to that with Ashlynn. So you're catching large numbers of, in particular, racers, and all of your top finds were really, colubrid, non-venomous snakes. And how about some of these more like focal animal studies you said you were doing on? What'd you say, rat snakes, and what were the other species?
Rat snakes, gray rat snake and corn snake. So
these are your nest predators. A lot of those are nest predators, but two of your bigger nest predators in the group of snakes. So what did you learn with that? Were they eating all the quail?
I don't really think so. No, it's hard to say, but we did have videos. I mean, we had cameras on quail nests during this time, and snakes were just a minor part of nest predators, a very minor part. I mean, I think it was definitely less than 10%. I think it was less than 5%. A very, very small part. I mean, your raccoons, possums, and armadillos are your big nest predators. Mm-hmm. We do have snakes killing adult quail. Mostly that's cottonmouths. But for the most part, I don't think that they're killing a lot. I think that if they happen upon a quail with chicks, that we were finding, we had chicks with transmitters on them, and we would find, a snake that looked like it swallowed a bunch of ping pong balls that was just full of quail chicks. And that happens, but I think that's just, that's just two animals just happen to come together at the same time. So I don't think they're necessarily seeking quail out. But the gray rat snakes and corn snakes, it was just interesting about them. Like the corn snakes, very, very tied to pine trees, very, very fossorial. Actually, they spent a lot of time underground. They both had, around that 7 to 10 acre home range. The gray rat snakes, very, very tied to hardwoods. That's where they were spending, all of their time. They were either up there, I think, digesting in a tree or shedding. But what I loved about that was just the site fidelity that they had. It was amazing to me that something that's crawling around its belly is so familiar with its home range and would go back to the same tree again, or the same hole again and again and again. And they would have a few different spots that they liked, throughout that home range that they would go to again and again and again. But it's just amazing to me, the site fidelity and the fact that they just are so familiar and know their way around.
Yeah. So basically the rat snakes were, because your hardwoods would be more in your lower wet areas for the most part. So your rat snakes were kind of more in the lower, more mesic areas. And then your corn snakes were more in the upland, drier sites.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we had some areas on tall timbers that just for whatever reason had fire exclusion, and the gray rat snakes would use those if there was hardwood trees. But since we've done Ashlynn's study, we've done hardwood removal. levels. And so that has really impacted our gray rat snake numbers. And that one is the fact that we've seen a decline in gray rat snakes from my research to Ashlyn's. That one's very easy to describe because that's just a reduction in hardwoods. That they really love so much. So that's the one that I figured was going to happen. And that I was like, I hope this happens because that's so easy to explain. But some of the other ones are more difficult.
Well, that's a good segue. Let's transition it over to you, Ashlynn. And so first of all, let's just talk about, so you're coming in 20 years behind the study Kim did, but luckily you have Kim to help guide you in this study. And so you basically, you put out the exact same trapping arrays in the exact same spots. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have 21 arrays across the property, which is 4,000 acres. Mm-hmm. 4,000 acres. Like she said, we have some in fields, some in uplands, some in bottomland hardwood areas. I tried to get my traps in the exact same spot as Kim's. I think there's one that's like across the field, but other than that, they're in the exact same spots. Build them the same, maintain them the same, all that good stuff.
And how about, we didn't really talk about the timing. You mentioned earlier that you're basically surveying, I can't remember, 9 months of the year. It's a long survey period. I'm assuming that also mirrors what Kim had done previously.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. March to October, 3 months out of every
3 weeks.
3 weeks out of every month. Yeah.
Gotcha. And you're running those traps, I'm assuming, 7 days a week, basically?
Every day. If anybody wants to come help check snake traps, we'll be running them next year too.
That's great. Well, so why don't tell us a little bit about, again, in a general sense, and then we can kind of compare and contrast changes. But I know you haven't been, it sounds like you've got one season under your belt. So how would you describe, independent of what Kim found in the past, just how would you describe kind of snake communities as you're seeing them based on your trapping? Again, same types of things: diversity, species richness, relative abundance of various species. How would you describe snake communities based on what you've seen so far?
Yeah, so I actually just finished up my second field season. I finished putting in the data this morning, actually, because I wanted to have updated data to talk about this. But there's a lot of cottonmouths. They make up about 45% of my captures. Still like an okay amount of racers. Not getting very many water snakes and not getting very many coachwhips. I've got 12 species. I've caught about almost 800 captures. It's hard for me to talk about this, to talk about it without comparing it to Kim's, just because that's what I spend most of my time doing is comparing it to Kim's. A lot of cottonmouths. That's what I have to say.
A lot of cottonmouths.
Okay. So, and I want to talk about the cottonmouths more in depth, because it sounds like cottonmouths are to you like rat snakes and corn snakes were to Kim, that you've gone in a little more depth there in a sense. But first of all, back to Kim, you didn't mention cottonmouths when you talked about your sampling. Like what kind of component did cottonmouths make up of those earlier samples?
They were in your top 5.
I think they were in my top 5. I think, so they were number 2. So everything.
Oh, were they? I didn't hear. I'm sorry. I must have missed it.
I didn't hear. I messed up because Ashlynn needs to tell me all these things. But so they were my number 2, but I mean, they were 50% of my captures were black racers. And I would say, I think I just guessing 15. It was like 15% were, maybe 20% were cottonmouths. So it really wasn't a big component like it is now. And I caught, 16 different species, and Ashlynn caught 12 different species. So there's the species that have dropped are the ones that we expect, like Eastern hognose. Where are they? I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so Ashlynn, which species, what are the 4 species that you haven't been able to find that Kim captured?
So we have rough green snake, red belly water snake, Eastern hognose. What's the 4th one? What am I forgetting?
Mm, I don't know.
Oh, scarlet snake.
Scarlet snake. And I will say, Chris, like these traps are this study is for quail predators. So we're talking about big terrestrial snakes. I'm not talking about fossorial crown snakes or any of the little guys. Like that's not what we're trying to catch. We don't have pitfalls like that are they can get out of our traps. And even rough green snakes, I mean, it's not even designed to catch them.
And as you know, there are other certain species are better found under other techniques, whether they be cover boards or whatever pitfalls. But so in the species you just mentioned, I could see being species you might miss, like you were just talking about, Kim. It's probably was an anomaly that you were catching scarlet snakes. I'm sure they were there, and I'm sure they still are there.
Yes.
But they're just these are species that you wouldn't be as likely to catch. The hognose is interesting because I do think you would be catching hognose in your trapping arrays, but they, I'm assuming back in your time they weren't a real high density animal either.
They
so you
weren't.
could just be
I caught
missing
I think one on tall timbers. So not a high density species at all. But a species I expect that would still be here, but hognoses are declining everywhere, so not surprising.
And then let's hold the cottonmouths because we'll use that to transition into talking more about cottonmouths. But so there's a species difference, but that seems very explainable based on the trapping techniques and just that all those species would be relatively low numbers in your samples. I assume you don't think any of those 4 have disappeared from the landscape, and it's a big concern based on the results.
I think some of them kind of like we said, you kind of catch them by chance. Like the scarlet snake, you only caught 1 here. Hognose, you only caught 1 here. Same with the rough. I think all 4 of those, you only caught 1 of each of them. I have gotten a rough green snake that I've been able to swab for pathogen analysis, but we caught it opportunistically. Someone had hit it in the driveway, so we didn't actually catch it in my trap. So I do have one of those recorded, but it wasn't actually caught in my trap. So they are still here. So like Kim said, I think it's just really that the traps aren't built for them.
But our total captures are not that far off from each other. Like total captures per year, we both averaged around 750
for 2 years.
Yeah, for 2 years. So I mean, the total capture is really interesting because that's not changed. It's just the community has changed.
Yeah. So what are some other kind of, besides the cottonmouths, or maybe that is the big substantive change that we'll talk about, but are there other, before we go there, are there other changes that were significant?
Yes, very much so. So let's see. I mean, Black Racer is interesting. I caught 457 and Ashlyn's at 214. So that's that difference, there.
We still have we will have a 3rd field season next year, so I feel like that number will go up, but not necessarily all the way.
Not really, yeah. And then obviously we've seen differences in gray rat snakes, which I already talked about. I caught 77. Ashlyn's currently at 24-ish. The big story here to me is this one is coachwhips. I caught 70. And big adults, 6-footers, 7-footers, huge, big adults. And Ashlyn's caught 4. And they've all been juveniles.
So someone's having babies. I just can't find them.
Yeah. But I mean, our traps catch coachwhips, and I don't think they're a dominant snake on the landscape by any means. But I mean, I caught them with a great deal of consistency. And especially in April, when those snakes are breeding, they're really moving a lot across the landscape. And I don't know where coachwhips are.
And all 4 of them were from last year. I didn't catch a single one this field season.
Yeah. Weird.
That is interesting. So first of all, with the rat snakes, you mentioned kind of the reason there that you've been doing a lot of hardwood management. And for some people who are out there that may be thinking that's a catastrophe, that rat snakes are declining, in these ecosystems we're talking about, in many of the settings, hardwoods really shouldn't be there if the ecosystem's functioning properly. Exactly. So it's almost like a good thing ecologically that we're seeing fewer rat snakes. But yeah, coachwhips. So coachwhips are eating a variety of things: lizards, other snakes.
Opportunistically, probably some, birds. I know they eat some quail chicks opportunistically, but I think they're, big lizard eaters. Diurnal snakes,
Yeah. Any, I'm trying to think even back to our sampling, like our SFD sampling, if we'd seen, but they didn't jump out to us the way I remember it in terms of having a lot of prevalence or, I don't know. That's interesting. Do you guys have any speculation on what's happening?
I mean, I wonder about soil compaction. I'm
Too
not
many
yet.
tractors.
Yeah, I wonder about that. But they're not hugely fossorial snakes, but I think that stump holes and things like that are important to them. But we don't have a huge gopher tortoise population here on tall timbers either. A lot of those I think were eaten off early. But we have some still, but I don't know. I don't know.
These comparisons you're making with everything we're talking about. So you sampled many properties, Kim. Are you only comparing tall timbers to tall timbers?
Yes, okay. We are only comparing tall timbers to tall timbers. Yeah. We cut out everything else. Yeah. So I don't know. And I mean, although, the gray rat snakes are declining but the corn snakes are doing fine. Like corn snakes, our numbers seem to be pretty similar. And also another fossorial snake. So you would think that what was impacting a coachwhip would impact a corn snake. And I don't know.
Our other big decline, aside from coachwhips and rat snakes, is banded water snakes.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but I know that they're another bar that's went really low.
Really low. I think I might have the numbers. Yeah. So I caught 94 banded water snakes and Ashlynn has caught 12. And that is inexplicable to me too. Tall Timbers is on a 6,000 acre lake. So, and we've got traps that are right along the lake edge. So we often catch banded water snakes and we often see them. And while we're out doing field work or whatever, just crawling across the road or whatever. And they're not as prevalent as they used to be. And this is one of the species that we do expect that pentastomes would get in very quickly. But as far as we know, we don't have pentastomes here yet. That is something that Ashlynn has been monitoring for. So,
and some of the water snakes, I can't remember about bandeds, have relatively high prevalence of snake fungal disease. Not that that's necessarily having population level impacts, but the other thing we don't know here, right, is with most snake species, there are some we're getting there, but we don't even know what like natural, fluctuations might be in a banded water snake population, for example. We don't have like longitudinal data for 40 years that show some ups and downs and all of that. But it's fascinating, and I'd be curious, maybe I'm opening up a too big a door, but I'd be curious for anybody in the audience who wants to speculate, to comment on this episode, what they think it could be.
I would love that.
The more ideas, the better.
Yeah. Well, and it could be a cyclic thing, and I've thought about that. Like, are we just in do they have like a natural cycle? Like so many mammals do, and everything, has boom and bust years. And are we just kind of in a bust years? I don't know. It makes me never want to stop trapping in a way, but
yeah.
I will say,
coachwhips. Go ahead, Ashlynn. I'm sorry.
I sent in 2 banded water snake swabs for SFD, for qPCR, and both of them were negative. But yeah, I don't know. I think you were going somewhere with cottonmouths, but I was going to say I'll say my theory is that cottonmouths are just eating everybody, including the coachwhips.
Look at cottonmouths. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that I don't know why, but the coachwhip decline would worry me more. They're both common species, right? But the coachwhip, it just seems more ecologically sensitive. That's not based on anything. That's complete speculation.
Well, and I saw during my research a lot of coachwhips because they overwinter and they're down underground, and a lot of them overwinter in gopher tortoise burrows. And we would see a lot of like lesions and stuff on them, especially early in the spring. And I sent some of that stuff off to Terry Dooner, and I don't know if snake fungal disease was even really on the radar then that much. But even in our snakes that have tested positive for snake fungal disease, they're not, it's not like a snake that you see, like I've seen some in Wisconsin that have snake fungal disease that are just hideous looking, like you don't even want to touch them. They're, it's obviously, and it seems like down here, like our snakes that get snake fungal disease, it doesn't seem like it's necessarily killing them. It's just something that they have, but it seems like they can get over it. So, I don't know. The coachwhips, it is worrisome to me. And I'm really bummed because there's something awesome about catching a great big 6-foot snake. And I would catch them in box traps. And in the summer, in the spring when they were breeding, it would be like a male would be like 2 males would be tracking a female. And so in my box trap, which is a 4x4 box trap, I'd have 3 6-foot long snakes in that trap. And it's so fun to get them out. And I'm just so sad that Ashlynn has not had this experience because they're all striking at you, and they'll lift the heads up off the ground and it's like chaos and super fun. And it's just, they're so amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a break to let you know that you can stay connected to the Orianne Society by signing up for our monthly newsletter. Be the first to receive exciting updates on reptile and amphibian conservation, from the latest news and staff blog posts to exclusive announcements like upcoming Snake Talk podcast guests. Go to our website at www.orianne.org and sign up for the newsletter at the bottom of our homepage. Well, Ashlynn, let's talk about cottonmouths. So, so you're finding many more cottonmouths than Kim found, correct? You said 45% of the sample. What are the numbers between the two sample periods?
So this is not including the last couple months.
Yeah.
But individuals, Kim caught 182 and I've caught 279.
Yeah, and you have additional, and your sampling period has been a shorter sampling period. So you're catching significantly more. So you care to speculate wildly about why are you seeing more cottonmouths?
That's a great question. We've talked about how they give live birth, which is, a benefit, especially with things predating nests and eating eggs. But my only thing with that is that they were also doing that when you trapped. Could be someone said something about it being like a wetter year. Could be human dimensions. Like you said, people are killing less of them. I don't know.
Yeah,
cottonmouths strike me as a difficult one from like human persecution perspective to really knock back a population. I mean, unless you have like a backyard goldfish pond and you're killing them every day. But in general, I think humans can put like a bigger herding on like a diamondback population, say, than a cottonmouth population.
What's interesting is that when I was doing my research, I kind of noticed that once the snakes were hitting a specific size, I was catching them more in upland traps than I was in bottomland traps. So that once the cottonmouths hit a specific size, so I did an analysis and it was like statistically significant that once they hit about 18 inches, they're much more likely to be found in the uplands than the bottomlands. And I think that is a prey item shift. That they're moving from frogs and things like that to rats and other, bigger prey items. And so that was just something that I kind of analyzed early, after I was done and never really did anything with it. But Ashlynn is catching them. I mean, I think she catches more cottonmouths in the upland traps than she does in the bottomland traps.
Oh, yeah.
And so it seems like that I was maybe on the front end of this shift of them moving out of the bottomlands into the uplands. And so they've also have a lot more space to occupy now than I think they ever once did. And they're just generalists. They are the trash can of snakes. They will eat everything. They will eat other snakes. They will eat rodents. They don't care. They'll eat, they're cannibalistic. I mean, they really don't care. So I think that, plays in effect. And, the fact of, like Ashlynn was saying, live birth, I think that matters. And in a landscape where we have fire ants that are killing things the moment they hatch out of an egg, live birth has to matter. And I I don't know. I mean, and they're not susceptible, they're not susceptible in an egg form to raccoons, possums, armadillos, even though, we do predator trapping here and we trap raccoons, possums, and armadillos. We have not ever in my 20 years that I've been here ever run out of possums, raccoons, and armadillos. Like they are plentiful on the landscape, even with human control. And, I do wonder too, like before I started my snake study 20 years ago, like I do believe that cottonmouths were controlled more by humans on tall timbers. And then, we've basically stopped, we don't kill snakes on tall timbers anymore. And, I really wonder if that wasn't a species that wasn't, somewhat more controlled by humans, especially in uplands where you're going to come across them all the time. I mean, everybody's dog on tall timbers has been bit by a cottonmouth. I mean, they are just everywhere. And I mean, Ashlynn will check snake traps and come in with 4 cottonmouths in a day, and that's not unusual.
And another example, like with the, what you mentioned about humans is like for example, back when you were doing it, I feel like if when they're tracking quail and a cottonmouth eats a quail, like they would kill the snake to get the the GPS collar out. But now, like, I'll hold the snake for however many days or whatever, and we'll wait until the GPS collar passes through the snake, and then we'll release the snake. So we're not like immediately resorting to, oh, it's just a cottonmouth, like kill it and get the collar out. Like but still, I mean, it's like we're talking like 4 quail a year get eaten by cottonmouths. It's not that many. And I did look, I had Ashlynn look because I was curious, if we divide her cottonmouths into age classes, like, juvenile, subadult, adult, like how many are surviving into adulthood? And I mean, it looked like maybe 75% are surviving into adulthood. So they definitely have high survival rates. And I think once you're a big cottonmouth, I don't think that much messes with you. So, and I also wonder if that's why we haven't seen decline in some of these other snakes, even coachwhips and black racers, like are cottonmouths eating them? They're an ambush predator, and we're talking about 2 diurnal snakes that move across the landscape all the time. And, are they just getting eaten? So one thing that we are doing that I've had Ashlynn start collecting, but I don't have, if anybody wants to give me any funding, but I want to do a diet study on cottonmouths. And so you can do a swab, an anal swab and do kind of like almost like a DNA diet study. And I'm just curious, so we've been collecting swabs on all of them and I've just kind of been banking them, but I'm just really curious, like what their diet profile looks like. And if there are a lot of snakes in that diet profile, and that might be explaining some things.
Interesting. So cottonmouths are taking over the world. They're moving into the uplands. They'll be in the towns soon.
They will be. Well, for those of you that have never worked up a cottonmouth, let me tell you, they are terrible. I mean, their musk is unbelievable, and they can spray it, and it just covers you. So Ashlynn and I smell like cottonmouths like every day of our lives.
They aim for your face.
They aim for your face. It's true.
Well, last aspect of the study I want to talk about, Ashlynn, maybe tell us a little bit about the snake fungal disease and the parasite components of the research you're doing.
Yeah, so all the snakes that I catch, we get them out of the traps and we bring them back to the lab to process them, work them up. We get a weight, we get a length, we do a snout vent length, we sex them, and then we give them a pit tag, and then we swab them for all these pathogens. So for each snake, we do a body swab for snake fungal disease. So dorsal and ventral surfaces, at least 8 times down the body. And then we make sure to focus on any spots that look abnormal, like any crusting, any lesions, anything that looks funky. And then we do an oral coagual on everything but venomous. For venomous, we just do coagual. That's for crypto. And then we're also doing an extra coagual swab to look for R. orientalis, which is the pentastome that the Burmese pythons are thought to have brought that's traveling up Florida. So we take all these, we bag most of them, but with the funding that we had, we were able to send 201 swabs from 120 individual snakes. 75 of those were oral coagual and 126 of those were body swabs. We haven't found any crypto. There's no crypto here, at least that's detectable. We sent 159 cloacal swabs for the pentastome. No pentastomes, those were all negative. But snake fungal disease, we did have 19 positives, mostly in cottonmouths and racers, which makes sense because they make up half of the data set. But none of them, we had a few, I think the copy numbers were in the thousands, but we also had quite a few that were just at trace level, like less than 10. So it is apparent, but it doesn't seem like it's anything that's, too crazy. Like we, out of the, 100 or 201 swabs we sent, we got 19 positives, which is, it's pretty good that it's not, high.
Will you talk a little bit about the symptomatic stuff, Ashlynn?
Yeah. So we were also doing priority for samples. So anything that had like crusting around the face, around the eyes and nose, top of its head, anything with like nodules kind of down along its body. Most of the symptoms are just that like crusting and that like abnormal shed, anything that looks like an old injury, stuff where like a fungal infection would love to fester. We make sure to swab those really good, and then we kind of prioritize those samples and mark it as body abnormality, which actually in my data, I went ahead and I ran a chi-square test, getting into stats now, but basically when you took body abnormalities and compared it to infection status, like what effect it had, it did come back statistically significant. So a lot of our snakes that did have visual body abnormalities did test positive. Even though we did have a few with abnormalities that tested negative, we did have a lot that tested positive. So,
which is kind of nice. It's expensive to do this analysis. And so if you don't have a lot of money and you just want to know if you've got snake fungal disease, like it's really helpful just to send in symptomatic ones. If you want to know prevalence, then you've kind of got to go to a random sample. But we started just, is it here? And then we were kind of looking more at prevalence and just sent in a random sample of them. But, that depends on what your objectives are and how much money you have, because I don't remember how much it costs to run every sample, but it's not cheap, it adds up fast.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're approaching an hour, so we're going to begin winding down. But last thing on this project, what's the future hold? I'm assuming, Ashlynn, you have at least another sampling season. And so maybe you can talk about that, kind of your plans relative to your graduate program, when you plan on finishing and so on. And then maybe, Kim, you can speak to the broader future relative to these data and, what are your thoughts going into the future relative to snake monitoring on tall timbers?
Yeah, so like I said, we just wrapped up the second season. I'm supposed to graduate in the spring in May, which is coming up and scary. So I'll spend the winter, analyzing my data, a lot of writing, and editing and revising and more writing. And then graduate in the spring, defend. So for my thesis, I'll just have, the 2 field seasons to compare, but then I'm going to stay here for a 3rd field season. That way, when I write a publishable manuscript, we will be able to directly compare the 3 years to the 3 years. And then after that, I have no idea. but for now,
I'm keeping her forever, and that's what's happening to her.
I have a plan until at least next October.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Good. Kim, what's the plan for the data set and the system? Is this going to be it for a while, for another 20 years, or what are your thoughts on snakes and tall timbers?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of want to keep snake trapping. I think that I may switch to camera surveys for a few years just so it's less effort. Trapping is just so much work. And it's stressful on animals, and I just wonder, is it really worth it, to do for many, many years in a row. I might leave the drip fences up and switch to camera surveys and just do it that way and just kind of keep tabs on everyone. I can, if I get some funding, I can put pit tag readers out at those camera stations so I can at least be detecting individuals and get some survivorship on them. without having to always have animals in hand. And then, maybe in another, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, I maybe do another round of trapping. I do want to go back to both Pebble Hill Plantation and the Wade Tract and do another surveying, some more surveying there to look at those, that if there's changes that have happened there since we've seen these dramatic changes at Tall Timbers. I'm just curious, are the same trends happening everywhere, or are we just kind of an anomaly? So that's a plan. I've never sampled anything here at Tall Timbers with tin piles either. So we've established some tin sites so we can also do some winter sampling. I'm kind of interested in if snake fungal disease is more prevalent in the winter, which I assume that it would be. So that way I can kind of get a longer data set on some of that pathogen work. And, we'll continue monitoring as we get snakes in hand for pentastomes, which is very worrisome. I mean, we know it's coming. And as soon as I find out pentastomes are here, I might start more intensive trapping again, just because, not that I want to monitor the decline, but I think that it's important that we understand it as it occurs. Most places I feel like they've found pentastomes, but they didn't have the pre-data. So given that I'll have pre and post data after pentastome arrival, I feel like that's going to be a unique data set to have, especially in Florida. So we'll continue a lot of different things. I mean, a lot of this is somewhat based on funding, just because a lot of this is a lot of effort, a lot of human input, which is, the most expensive kind of funding to get. But, I think we'll definitely keep monitoring what's going on.
Great. Well, before we wrap up, I like to have all of my guests tell me a snake story. So we'll start with you, Ashlynn. Could you tell me your best snake story?
Okay. I don't know if it's the best snake story. My best snake story. But
your best.
Yeah. So this story will kind of put in perspective everything that we said about cottonmouths, that they're everywhere. I was checking one of my traps, and I was out there with my intern last year. Her name's Paige, and she hadn't gotten a bigger cottonmouth out of a box trap yet. And so our protocol, you have tongs, you have a hook, you have whatever, and you pick it up out of the box and you put it into a bucket. And so she was trying to do that, and she didn't get him all the way in, and so he managed to slip out. And I can just see him going through the grass. And so I was like, hey, hand me the tongs. I can see it. I'm going to go get it. And so this snake was probably 4 feet. And so I'm going, and I see cottonmouth pattern. And I'm like, oh, there he is. And so I pick it up, and this snake's 2 feet long. And I went, well, that's not it. So I put it in the bucket, and I had her go get another one. And I keep going, and I went, oh, there it is. This one's 3 feet long. And I was like, I was just pulling cottonmouths out of the grass, and none of them were the one that I was looking for. So yeah, that really put it in perspective to me that you need to watch where you step.
That's great. And you process every cottonmouth that you catch, right? So you bring them back to the lab.
Yeah, and she felt so bad. She's like, I lost it. And I was like, yeah, but we doubled our number of cottonmouths since you lost it. You're good.
That's funny. How about you, Kim? Do you have a story for us?
Well, I mean, I have, probably Pearson, my husband, his favorite snake story that includes me is I have a bladder the size of an acorn, so I always have to go pee, and I find a lot of snakes while I'm wandering off somewhere to pee. And probably my favorite snake peeing story is wandering away from a group in Costa Rica after we had just walked through an area, and I was like, Pearson, I'm gonna go back here and pee. And I just remember squatting and being we had just walked down this path and being Pearson, I yelled at him, Pearson, I'm peeing actively. And I'm there's a big snake that just went across the path right here. And Pearson came running back, and he grabbed it. It was a huge musarana, which is kind of
nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you just never see those snakes very often. And it was a huge one. And so he was glad, but that's one of them. But I won't tell two because I can. My other one that I think is Pearson Hill and Andrew Dorso, who a lot of people probably know, and I were road cruising And we came up upon in the middle of the road, like this whole snake, like smorgasbord. And I was like, what is going on here? And it was 3 dead snakes. And it was, I think I have this right. Andrew Dorso wrote this up in her review. Like this is 2015, maybe even before that, probably like 2007, maybe. But I think that it was an eastern king snake that had been run over, and there was a corn snake that had busted out of its belly. But that got run over, and those 2 snakes were dead on the road. But when we came up, there was a 3rd dead snake, and I think it was a cottonmouth, was trying to eat the dead eastern king snake off the road, and while it was eating it, it got ran over and got killed.
Oh my gosh.
And so I just remember finding that, and the 3 of us being like, what happened here? Like, because it was just this big snake mess. And it's sad because I guess it's dead snakes, but I always it was a memorable event, I guess.
Yeah, that does sound memorable.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you
for having us.
No problem. And I just wanted to thank the audience and tell everybody to remember, snakes are animals too, and it's a privilege to see one in the wild.